Hey everyone, welcome to the Drury Outdoors 100% Wild podcast. I'm your co-host Tim Chelsvik, joined by Mr. Matt Drury. Matt, how are you?
I'm good, man. What's up?
You know what? It's the heat of summertime, but we're getting very close to the start of deer seasons, and I know I'm not the only one who's excited about getting started.
Yeah, so it's you got to kind of get through the grind of July, right, and August to get to the time of year that we all love. But we're almost through July by the time this airs. It probably will be about the end of July. So that's when things start really getting serious. Most of the bucks have pretty much developed into what they're going to be, more or less. So
Trail camera pictures mean something now.
Exactly. So everybody, that's the time where you start getting texts from your buddy and you're like, look at this slammer I got. And if you don't have a slammer, you're just like, that looks great.
And I don't have any slammers yet.
I don't know yet because my lease, we just got the cameras out a week or two ago, and then the new piece that Dad and I bought, unfortunately, it's right on the Mississippi River, and it's been underwater twice since we bought it.
That's the trade-off between fertile soil and
it is.
flooding.
That being said, I mean, we knew that, and we purposely didn't plant any grain there for that reason, and plan on going in and planting the biologic here in August, and hope we get some really good fall food plots going. And I have a feeling that, and Dad, as soon as we walked the place, back in the wintertime or early spring, whenever it was, we kind of both said, you know what, this probably is only going to be good during the rut. We don't know yet, but I've been telling myself not to get too tore up whether or not I have good pictures early season, because I might, but with the way that water's been on the property, and I'm not holding high hopes. So got to get the inventory out nonetheless and start figuring the piece out. So
it'd be crazy if hip waders became part of your kit to get to your deer stand.
I don't think it's gonna.
Let's hope not.
So that kind of parlays us right into today's question about new properties, and we'll get into that in a second. But I want to quick introduce our guest today, Tom Ware from the Drury Outdoors team. And if anybody has watched our stuff over the last decade, they've seen Tom and his band of merry men, Mike Clementson and Scott Manifold, and of course Tom's daughters. They've had tremendous success on all different types of properties, small and large and everything in between. And Tom's one of the best at on our team, especially on growing big whitetails, finding good pieces, and cultivating them into great pieces.
And making everyone else jealous in the process of those big
bucks. What's up, Tom? How are you, buddy?
I'm good. Hey, thank you very much. That was a nice introduction. I don't know about if it's all true, but I tell you what, we have a lot of fun, that's for sure.
Well, so we have the question of the day is brought to you by Cabela's, and it's from Caleb Emmerich, and Caleb is over in Indiana.
Hey guys, this is Caleb Emmerich from Indiana, and I wanted to ask, when you're looking at a new hunting property, what is the first thing you're looking for? Food or water, cover? What's your order of operations getting those things there? Where do you like to place your stands? Just want to know what your order of operations was and what the first things are you look at. Thanks.
So, Tom, you were first on our list of guys to address this because you have so much experience with selecting properties and figuring out what's important, and you have such a track record of killing great deer. You obviously have some type of a system. So first off, because Caleb's question is kind of in three parts: what's important to you when you look at a property, and then what's your order of operations and how you set it up, and then kind of lastly, where do you hang stands? But when you start looking at a parcel, what is important to you?
Well, I first of all, it's a great question, Caleb. I kind of had to ask myself that. I said, when I first heard his question, I said, how do I break that down? And I started kind of just breaking it down in my mind, and I thought about it when I first look at an aerial photo. That is indeed what I'm looking at. Usually, when I'm looking at farms, because that's how they sell. They'll be on a website or maybe it's, the neighbors for sale comes up, and you're looking usually at an aerial photo, and I'm looking at how much timber there might be, how much farmland there might be, or lakes, ponds, creeks, how much cover is there for whitetails? Is there enough cover to hold a large amount of whitetails, the type of populations that might be there and stuff like that. that's kind of the first thing I'll look at.
And Tom, are any of those components, the absence of them, or is that a deal breaker for you? If there's food cover but no water, will you pass, or does it depend?
It just kind of depends on each property. I know a farm I bought in Illinois a few years ago didn't have, you mentioned water, didn't have water on the north 300 acres. And I actually went in and built a pond and really changed the whole way the deer move on that side of the farm. So it just depends. But one thing for sure I need is a lot of cover.
Sure.
So for you, when you talk to any agent, any good, whitetail properties or mossy oak properties guys, they talk about having good tillable, and that being an important factor in trying to sell a piece. So as a buyer, is that something that is a huge factor for you, or are you more concerned with that cover, because obviously you need to hold the deer in order to have deer? You can always put in some hidey-hole food plots or what have you. That as a listing agent, they're usually concerned from a standpoint of an out-of-state buyer needing to turn a profit on the piece or have some sort of income, right?
Yeah. For me, I've bought and sold, probably 20 to 25 farms over the past 10 years. And I always seem to hold on to a lot of them quite long because I kind of fall in love with them. But definitely income and crop is important because it helps you. It helps pay for a lot of things, whether it's fences or gates or spraying your food plots or planting the seed. I mean, helps me when I get home and talk about it with my wife. It sure helps explain a lot of that.
The most important factor.
I just bought some
right.
magic beans. Now, what role, if any, do neighbors play? Do you ever kind of talk to people on adjacent properties when you're considering buying a parcel?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's probably the next thing I do after really breaking down that aerial photo is I'll expand the aerial photo, whether it's on Google Earth or a site like that, and I'll look at what the neighbors have. Is it all pasture? Is it, I have a farm I bought, a 178-acre farm that Scott Manifold and I own in Iowa. And the great thing about that is there's about 50 acres tillable, and it's the only tillable acres in thousands of acres around us. So it's the perfect storm. We kind of named it the perfect storm because, all those, all the timber around us is timber and pasture. So there's cattle around us, and there's a lot of timber that will hold deer, but it seems like they come on us to bed and they come on us to feed. So we hold a lot of deer just because of the food factor. So that's definitely the next thing I do, Tim, is I look at the neighbors, and sometimes I'll call the neighbors and, if I can get a hold of them and find out who it is, and I'll find out, do they practice QDM? What kind of management plan do they have? Things like that.
Have the neighbors ever broken a deal for you? Like you thought the property looked great, but then you talked to the neighbors and you're thinking maybe not so much.
I cannot recall him breaking any deals, but I know a couple instances where I was definitely more interested in the farm because I found out the neighbors, they only shoot 4 year and older bucks or something like that.
Okay.
So I definitely helped sell the farm, or it helped me buy the farm quicker.
Sure. It kind of augments the deal.
So is there a certain ratio of cover, to tillable that you look for, or is it more of, hey, let's look at the total surroundings and see, like you just mentioned here with that piece? What's your strategy there?
Well, everyone's different because I bought some little farms that might butt up next to a big. I remember I had a little 20-acre parcel in Greene County, Illinois, and it didn't have a lot of timber. It had a lot of CRP and just a couple fingers, actually like one big finger, but it had a big chunk of timber right to the neighbors. So I knew that, if I planted some food plots, I would be drawing some deer over. But usually, the ideal situation would be, I don't know, anywhere from 50-50 mix from crop to tillable. A lot. I mean, that's a lot of income. That's nice for a recreational piece to have at least 50% tillable. That's ideal. Anywhere down to maybe 25% to a third, 33%, somewhere anywhere from 25% to 50% is nice. It helps pay for a lot of things. And then I've also bought pieces that have absolutely zero income. And then, I've bulldozed some areas to make some tillable and try to get some income. I always try to get a little income. It's kind of tough to have a piece and you have no income and you have to pay property tax and you have all the other things that cost you in farming that you have to pay for out of pocket.
Yeah. Now, so you've obviously bought and sold a lot of properties in your time. For someone that is looking to buy their first farm, would you suggest that they go through a broker, or is it something that you could, if you're relatively smart enough, you can figure it out on your own?
Well, it's you mean as far as finding a realtor to go? It's teach their own. It's usually if you can get on several different sites, and look, but realtors are sure nice. They usually know the farms and how much they're priced at, what the income is, whether they can be signed up into CRP. They might know some farmers in the area that you can use. I usually go through a realtor for sure.
Okay.
So to kind of backtrack a little bit, let's just take us through step one. Once you've identified the property and you've bought it, you got boots on the ground now. Just kind of take us through, what that looks like for you.
Absolutely. Usually after I've, kind of investigated that aerial photo, I might look for things that, whether structure, maybe it's a big pond, maybe it's something weird about the property, like maybe there's an apple orchard, an old apple orchard that still has quite a few apple trees, or is there a big ravine where the deer won't cross because it's too steep? Things like that. I'll just look at the structure of the ground, and usually I go walk it. And that's one of my favorite things to do is just get out in the timber. It's usually easier walking, in February, March, April, that time before, in the middle of summer, it's pretty tough. But, of course, I still do it. And then, I'm looking for where the food might be and where the bedding areas are. So I'm going to see how the deer are using that property. And then, of course, my mind, if I have already decided to whether lease the property or buy the property, then I'm looking at the whole time my mind is just churning on where can I put this food plot? How can I access this food plot, based on a north wind or a south wind or whatever wind might be best for that certain food plot.
Which is probably not something that everyone considers when they think, okay, that this property has all the components of the equation, but you don't think about access to your stand until you need to get into your stand, and then you're like, oh man, I think I'm gonna bust some deer getting in here because the wind just doesn't work. So it's a good reminder to consider that you got to figure an exit and an entrance route.
Absolutely.
That's something Mark and Terry always drill into me. It's like, well, how are you going to access it? It's like, well, it was a good idea for a food plot to be put there, but you're right. I just basically busted every deer on my way to the stand.
No good if you can't get in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we hunt a lot of edges, meaning edges of our property. We're trying to put a food plot. Maybe there's a big piece of timber right in the center of the property. I'm not going to go with a bulldozer and make a new food plot right in the middle of that timber because you can get there, and I'm not saying you can't kill a big deer there, but they're going to figure you out before you figure them out.
Mm. Yeah. So you've got the property, and you decide that there's some pretty significant land features that you want to improve or change, like the pond that you mentioned putting in. How much time does it take for things to settle down and for the deer to establish maybe a new routine that you figure out, okay, like it's going to take this much time before things settle down, and it'll kind of look like it's going to look when I hunt it?
That's a great question. Not very long. It's kind of like us, new restaurant goes up and all of a sudden we're like, hey, you try it out and you're back, you're going there all the time. It does not take long at all. They'll find a little food plot. If you got good good rains and Nebraska's coming up, or clover, or if it's beans or corn, whatever it might be, they seem to find it very quickly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have a map in the background. For those of you that are listening, you can watch this show on YouTube. Just go to DoD TV and check out the 100% Wild podcast. But so you're clearly a land guy because you have a satellite imagery behind you. What is that?
Well, here, I'll take you over to, I got a couple. This is my office, and it's kind of my passion is land. So I'm always, this is my Iowa farm here. And the one that was behind me earlier is my Illinois farm, and they're my two biggest farms. And it kind of, I don't know if the glare is real bad there. I'll try to see if I can get a little better. But this kind of shows you, this is my Iowa farm. There's a big section of timber in the middle, and I try not to go into there. And here's my border right here. But luckily, this farmer, he allows me to go in here. I can go in and access this from the south. And I'll hunt this food plot. All the bedding is to the north, and I can access it from the south with the wind in my face. So, that's one of that's called the Memorial Field. It's just been a big producer for years and years.
Okay.
Here's another one. If anybody's watched the Drury shows, they know I killed that buck Willy Wonka. This is one. It's got cedars all the way around it, and we actually access it through this pasture. Again, I lease this property here so I can access it through here, and there's a box blind right there, so it's very easy to get in, quiet, and the deer are not bedded, in areas where you go through, so it works out rather well.
Tom, how big would you say those printouts are up on your wall? They're pretty massive.
Yeah, those are pretty big. Well, let's see. One of them is they're both about, one's 4x4 and the other one's like 3x4.
Yeah. So the reason I ask is it seems like if you have guests in to hunt, that would be an incredible tool to be able to show folks like, okay, here's where I'd like you to go. Here's how to access it.
Yep. Yeah, I would strongly recommend it. If you got a farm that you're keeping for a while, we use them for everything, whether we're talking about stands, food plots, how to get, where we found, we use them for other things, where we find mushrooms, where we, what pond we
show us that map.
They're just so handy. They're just so handy.
Yeah.
So, Tom, any other steps from there, once you really kind of honed in, what then? I mean, I guess trying to really figure out where exactly your food plot is, what you're planning, maybe the strategy of what your food source is?
Right. Definitely. In fact, I was just strategizing it with a couple guys that helped me plant everything. Just today, actually, ironically, it happened to be before you guys called. And, we'll try to set up, like we were talking about radishes, biologic radishes. We want to make sure that we have radishes for early season. The problem with radishes is they don't last very long because the deer annihilate them. So they're only really good, I have found out, at least from my deer herd, they know that I'm going to plant them somewhere. They find out where they're as soon as I plant them and they start growing, they start eating them. So they'll only last, we're lucky if they get through October. In November, they're just eaten down to the ground. So we plan to plant radishes for those early season killing plots. Otherwise, they're gone.
So then, once you transition into the rut and then late season, what's the strategy there?
Well, then we have things like last bite or winter bulbs and sugar beets, regular turnips, stuff like that. Clover and soybeans and corn are always good. But those we'll try not to plant radishes like and maybe a food plot that's 300 or 400 yards away from each other. Then you're kind of competing on the same food source. So if they're into radishes, I want that big buck in that timber to be in that radish field instead of having to wonder if he's going to be in this one or this one 300 yards away or this third one that's a quarter mile away. I want to know, like, hey, if I have radishes, I'm after a 5, 6, 7-year-old buck. He's probably going to know they're there. And, of course, I'm using my Reconyx cameras the entire time as well. And with a combination of all that, I'll determine, where I'm going to hunt based on the food and what the camera says.
Great. So what about
Yeah.
stand location? How do you, because that to me is one of the ultimate, that's kind of the end of the road in terms of your strategy, because
Hmm.
you can have a great food plot, but if your stand is not in the right location, it's not going to
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be food plot. It could be acorns, that are natural food
Sure.
plot. Well, I'm always looking at the wind and access. So if I can keep, as I'm entering my stand, if I can keep the wind blowing away from where the deer would be bedded.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to, I actually write it down on a piece of paper, and I'm sitting there going, okay, I might write down south winds. What stands do I have for south wind? And if it's a big piece, if a 700-acre farm like these two I have on my wall is, it takes a lot of thinking. If it's a 40-acre or 20-acre or 10-acre piece, then, you might only have one stand for a south wind, which is
Mm-hmm.
fine. But I'll write down, hey, if it's a south wind stands, if I have names for them or numbers, just everybody's different. So, and then when it's a south wind, I might go to that list and go, I can hunt these, maybe these 3 stands are great for a straight south wind. If it's, I even write down if it's a morning stand or an evening stand. So I might have a list of south wind morning stands. There might only be 2 that are perfect for straight south wind. Or if it's a south-southwest wind or a southwest wind, all those, I write down every single variation. I'm kind of a nut on just watching the wind and making sure it's in my face.
I want to add something here. If you didn't know, Tom also used to own an outfitting business. So
Yeah.
so this mindset, it came in handy. It came from
No
somewhere,
kidding,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. I
especially,
outfitted for 11 years in Pike County, Illinois. So that kind of gave me, we had 350 sets, of stands. So I had to kind of be detailed. I just kind of took it from the business, and now it's just me hunting and my friends and family. So
yeah.
it's nice not having to take a bunch of clients out.
Yeah, when your livelihood depends on people killing deer, then I imagine you get pretty darn detailed about when and
Yeah.
where to go.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. You definitely don't. It's the same thing though. You don't want to overpressure your stands,
mm-hmm.
and you got to know when to go in there and when it's, when the timing's right. And instead of just banging in there in the early season and hunting mornings, and you got to try to be patient. I always use the analogy, patience of a spider, because, a spider, much like a bow hunter, kind of casts his web, and, can only catch that bug, in a zone area.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of like us, we can only shoot so far with a bow,
Right.
maybe 40 yards in every direction. And you're just right there waiting for that bug to fly through, or waiting for that big buck to walk through. And it's very similar. So
That's my motto for this fall now. Be the spider.
yeah,
I like
patience of the spider.
Be the spider.
So when you think about stands, do you differentiate location and the type of stand, whether it's a box blind or a hang on or a ground blind? How do you make your decisions around that?
Well, I hunt a lot more box blinds than I used to. Um,
And why is that?
well, there's a lot of reasons. I will say probably one of the biggest reasons is I have 3 little girls and a wife that are concerned about me. And I had several guys on the Drury team, and just all kinds of people I know in the industry have fallen out, broken their backs, or paralyzed, and this can be a dangerous sport. And box blinds have, for that one fact alone, is probably the biggest reason. The second reason is I was hunting a lot with my children, and my 2 oldest girls, which they seem to be more interested in boys now than bucks. But
Something new.
they would sit in a box blind for a lot longer
Yeah.
than up against a tree or a ground blind. It seems like a box blind. No, you put carpet in there. They can get on the floor. They can take their phone with them, and so I've heard of some parents, they don't want them to take their phone, or they don't want them to take any games. The way I look at it is I had 3 to 3.5 hours with my child, one-on-one,
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be some downtime where they can play their game, and dead time where there's not deer, when you get in early. And so I always let them take it. And I just enjoyed the one-on-one time with them. So that's the second reason I use box blinds um, is because of that. Now I'd say the third is scent control. Scent control, if it's cool and you can keep the window shut, you can really, really control your scent a lot better. So, and with all of our, our nomad clothing and the scent, and the everything we use to control scent nowadays, it's just it's once you're in that blind, not actually getting to stand, but once you're in that blind, it's great. So,
is there any scenario where you would opt for a hang-on tree stand or a ladder stand versus a box blind?
Oh, for sure. Like in the timber, you can't put well, you can put box blinds in timber. I haven't yet, but I've always wanted to do that, but I just haven't got around to doing that yet. And I still would prefer to hunt out of a lock-on stand because you can just see all around you, and you just feel like more natural. You're in the timber, you're in your mossy oak camouflage, and you just kind of blend into nature. Of course, I think probably everyone agree that they would rather be in a lock-on, and you just feel better about being out there. But as far as improving your chances to actually harvest that buck, I got to go with the box blind.
And we've seen that over the years. I mean, I've said it on the podcast a lot. We take some heat for the box blinds.
Absolutely.
But the reality is when you try to film your hunt and do it at the level that we're doing it as far as consistency and the caliber of whitetails, and we have 4 TV shows and all the online stuff, like in theory it's great to sit in a lock-on every day of the season. In reality, when you can improve your chances by putting a box blind, just scent control factor being the most important in that side of things, on the edge of a food plot. I mean, our success has gone through the roof in the last decade or so, decade plus, because of those two things. The food plot architecture and the box blinds. You don't have the tree. Well, if you can, and that doesn't mean you have to buy one every time. I mean, you can build them, and there's a lot of blue collar guys out there that have great carpentry skills, and there's a lot of ways to skin that cat, so to speak.
Yeah.
So, it just has really helped us as a company over the last 10, 15 years tremendously.
Sure.
Yeah. Another thing, Matt, is everyone probably didn't realize that we got all that camera gear, and if it rains even for 5 minutes while you're out there for the whole day during November, it can ruin your cameras, and you got your GoPros up and everything else. And, so it's
twice the scent, twice the the camera gear, the gear, all the stuff. It becomes cumbersome, and that's not really the point of the conversation. But a box blind it helps. It makes it a little bit easier, and you'll take every advantage you can get.
Yeah. One of my favorite box blinds was a guy owned a property by Litchfield, Illinois. Everyone just called him Sleepy. I don't know what his real name was, but he would go. He would get these old, broken down RV, like tow behind RVs, and just park them out in his woods. He would just hunt out of those.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing what an old structure like that or something will work. An old barn. I used to hunt out of an old barn in my Iowa, and finally the barn fell down, so we were kind of bummed when we couldn't hunt out of it anymore.
Your blind fell down. Great. Well, anything else, property, stand, location related that you think folks ought to know, Tom?
Well, I would say, one of the last things I do is I contact the neighbors. And at least a lot, not every single time, if I can't get a hold of them, or if I've heard through reputation that, that they're just meat hunters and they don't want to be pushed to try to manage deer, then I don't, everyone's different. So a lot of them don't want, they don't want to be pushed into managing deer, which I never try to do that. But if they say, hey, are you going to manage and shoot 5-year-old and above deer, and I'll, maybe I'll stop shooting 2 and 3-year-olds. We'll just go for 4-year-olds. And, that's a great start. I mean, I have several farms I shoot 4-year-olds on, and that's what I try to do, is just you put out the cameras,
Mm-hmm.
you try to see what's there. And then if you take some of those pictures, share them with your neighbors and say, hey, this deer's 3. He looks 3 anyway. And sometimes you can't tell. And try to discuss that, hey, do you want to pass this deer? They really appreciate just the communication.
Sure.
And they might just say, hey, no, I'm shooting that deer no matter what. And you say, okay, that's fine too.
Mm-hmm.
Then you know that, hey, if he comes by, maybe you want to shoot him, or maybe you don't, or maybe you want to let your daughter shoot him, or, whatever. But it's communication with the neighbors.
Great.
For sure.
Awesome.
So Tim, before we kind of move on here, what do you look for when you're going in on a new piece or looking for a new piece?
So first off is I'm just typically happy to get a piece of property to hunt, because I think it's so. And most of the properties I have to hunt are ones that I've not purchased, but they're just properties that people have allowed me to come on to hunt. So I'm just thankful that they've invited me onto their property, because that's a pretty big. It's a big honor to be asked to come onto someone's land and hunt. So I'll look for, because most of them are smaller parcels, I'll look for trails, and is this a thoroughfare for deer, and is there some nasty thick stuff that I can get into, because that's typically, I'll take a climber and I'll go in, I'll kind of do the guerrilla style deer hunting. So I look for cover, I look for access in and out, and those are the primary things that I'm looking for. But I'm not looking at larger multi-acre farms. I'm looking at kind of smaller chunks of Ozark woods that we have here in Missouri.
Yeah, so and kind of a little bit of backstory. Tim's had great success doing that, and so that's why I was curious kind of what your strategy is, because it's not easy, and that's probably a little more applicable to a large part of the audience, is the style of hunting and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, and it's amazing the number of big deer that come by. I mean, I never cease to be amazed, and I think over time, and Tom, you probably agree, over time you kind of develop a sixth sense for where deer are going to move. It starts to feel like intuition, but probably you've built that through repetition and learning, trial and error. But there's just no better feeling than to walk into the woods, set up a climber, and then see a deer coming right toward, even if it's a doe. That just excites me, because it's an affirmation, like, maybe I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, you're in the right spot.
Exactly. Yeah. How about you, man?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still learning, very much learning, and so when Dad and I were looking at trying to find a new piece of property, and we're trying to do it as an investment, as something that we potentially will flip in a few years or whatever. And so you kind of have that in mind. And, so one thing we haven't talked about, for me, like, location was key as far as how far away from my home it
Especially
was.
with a family.
Yeah, young family, and otherwise I'd probably be going to Dad's place in Kirksville, or to the place he leases in Illinois, but I gotta find something close. Well, the closer you kind of get to St. Louis, not to say the worse the hunting is, but it's not like what I'm used to up in northern Missouri or whatever, over in Illinois. So you got to really be picky there and what you're looking for. But with this piece that we just bought, it was kind of a no-brainer, because in this river bottom, in the Mississippi River bottom, just to the south of us, have some really good neighbors that have actually reached out to me when they found out we bought it, and they've been managing their deer. But we kind of knew from the realtor that there were some big deer that were being killed in there. So for us, like, the first thing we did is try to find out what's being killed around us.
Sure.
And before we bought it, just because you can't set your cameras out. You can't get the inventory per se. You can walk it, obviously, with the realtor and go in there and try to look for sign. And obviously we did that, and there was a ton of sign, ton of trails. It had a lot of thick bedding. It didn't have any food on it. It's in a special Missouri program that you can't really do anything and everything you want to it. You kind of got to get permission and all that stuff. So, there were some detractors to it, but there were enough positives when it came to the bedding, the cover, in the river bottoms there. Mark and Terry have always talked about, because they kind of got their start, back in Bloomsdale, where we're from, the 40 Acre Club. It's same thing. It's in the Mississippi River Hills, and then over in Illinois when they started hunting pike, that stuff was very similar, and Tom's obviously very familiar with that ground out there, and so. Dad had a really good knowledge base. So
Sure.
for me, as somebody I'm just trying to learn, it's trying to pick up on the tells, like playing poker. It's
yeah.
trying to pick up on Mark and Terry's tells. What are they looking for? And it's a little different. Mark, he's going to be looking for, he's just a mastermind. He's looking for a lot of things. But one of the things he really keys in on, obviously, outside of cover is that access in.
Sure.
And on this piece, the access it can be good because since there's no food and all the cover, all the terrain looks the same, we could kind of figure out if I ever get my cameras out, we can figure out where the deer where I'm getting daylight activity and
work around that,
plant to where I can get easy access. So I got a lot of work to do in a short amount of time here, but the river's finally kind of receding and it's going to allow me to get back in there. But cover obviously is the first thing that Mark and Terry usually preach. They want to make sure the deer are in there first, So
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, and the whole factor that you brought up in terms of how close it is to your home and how quickly you can get there, that's one of the things that really works well for me because my properties are all within like a half hour to an hour away, with the exception I'll go to an outfitter down in southern Missouri, which is like a 3-hour trip, but because that just yields more time in the stand, which can lead to more success.
It's a huge factor because if when you have a young family, it's not like when I was growing up and Dad and Mark started the company. They were gone all the time. And it's just a different time. When they grew up, their dad was gone in construction all the time.
Yeah.
They never saw him.
Expectations are different.
They're totally different now. And so it's a factor for a young guy that's maybe looking for a new piece, whether he's leasing it or looking to buy it or looking to get permission or whatever. That's a factor. So for me, I guess that'd be my number one thing is location. Distance from my house.
It's got to fit your life.
I got to get home at night.
Right.
If I don't get home at night, I'm in trouble.
I'm glad I'm not the only one. Awesome. Well, that was it was a great comprehensive discussion. Hopefully, Caleb, you got your questions answered and we were able to help you out a little bit. So we've got a lot of stuff cooking here at Drury Outdoors, Matt. Do you want to clue the folks into what's shaking?
Yeah. First of all, if you want to leave a question for the podcast, you can go over to the DruryOutdoors.com website /podcast and there's a little sidebar. I think it's called SpeakPipe, and you can leave your question via your phone. And so we definitely want you guys to submit plenty of questions, and we're going to keep this thing rolling, try to get one every week out. Of course, you can listen to the Drury Outdoors 100% Wild podcast on all the major places that podcasts are. So Google, Stitcher, iTunes.
Yep.
Any more I'm missing there?
Probably, but if you're a podcaster, you will find us.
Make sure and subscribe. Of course, you can watch it here at the Drury Outdoors YouTube channel. And while you're there, we got tons of things going on right now. 13's cutting room floor. Pretty much all the behind-the-scenes footage that doesn't make the cut of the TV show, which there's a ton because we just can't squeeze it all into 30 minutes. And then, of course, we get the new show Critical Mass, and we have what we call Critical Mass Extreme, which it's a hunt it's an actual harvest that's never been seen anywhere before.
Exclusive,
it's exclusive to the Drury Outdoors YouTube channel. So the other thing going forward that we've been hitting quite a bit on TV is the new app that we got coming out August 28th called DeerCast. And that's something that we're really, really excited about because Mark and Terry and myself and the team here, we put a lot of effort into it. We've been beta testing it for close to 2 years, and it's finally kind of ready to see daylight. And, of course, Tom and the team had a chance to kind of get a hold of it last fall. And, let us know your thoughts, Tom, on the app itself.
I'm going to sound like a commercial, but I always tell everybody I only say in front of the camera what I believe. If it's a sponsor and I really don't like it, I probably won't say a lot. And I say a lot about a lot of our sponsors because I like a lot of them. This one for sure is I can get into Mark and Terry's mind through an algorithm on a app without having to text Mark anymore. So he probably loves it. He's not getting all these.
Maybe that's why he developed it.
Hey, where do I hunt? The atmospheric pressure of this and the temperature is this and that. And he'd always come up with this different thought than I had. And I was like, gosh, I was going to hunt this timbered ridge, and he's saying, hunt the bottoms and do this. And I was always like, how does he know? And then sure enough, we'd go to these bottoms, and we'd kill a big buck, and we're like, gosh, thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
So it's all in an app. I don't have to, I seriously, I do not have to text him hardly at all anymore. He might be texting me, like, what are you seeing here? And we're always kind of questioning each other and trying to find out what's best. But now he took all his brain power and Terry's together, combined them and put them into this app. And we were on it every day last year. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it great conditions? Last year we had really cold temperatures, and it seemed like a lot of days were great hunting, and it came true.
We had a lot of high pressure, cold temperatures. The moon was right at the right time of year. Last year was a good year in a lot of ways, but I think in beta testing, we felt like the app was 85-90% accurate throughout the fall, and maybe a little bit optimistic on the optimistic side. So we've kind of messed with the algorithm a little bit before we launch here in August, and try to hone in on it even more and put in some built-in pessimisms and that sort of thing. So anyways, we're excited about it. I look forward to seeing what the user at home feels like with it. I mean, we're becoming a tech company. We're not a tech company. We're a bunch of good old boys that like to hunt and like to share the information and try to help other people learn from our mistakes. And hopefully this app continues to do that. I mean, that's kind of the bread and butter of what Drury Outdoors Foundation was built on. And I think this is going to be just finally kind of the corner of that foundation, and we can complete it. It's going to be pretty awesome. I think people are really going to like it.
August 28th. Mark it on your calendar. That's the day it'll be available for download. And if you want kind of pre-release sneak peeks and information, and you want to be a power user when it comes out, sign up to be a DeerCast insider. Go to DruryOutdoors.com/DeerCast and submit your email, and we'll make sure that we send you out some how-tos before it launches. So big stuff coming.
Yep, absolutely. Free app. So here in year one, so we're looking to get a lot of feedback and hopefully a lot of users, and we're excited. A little nervous, but excited. So.
Cool. Well, Tom, thanks for joining us again. We really appreciate your insight. All right, great. Well, Matt,
appreciate it, guys.
How about we shut this thing down?
Yeah, I think that's it. All she wrote for this episode of the Drury Outdoors 100% Wildcast. Until next time, peace out.
See ya.
Have a good one.